So, good morning to all of you. I'm requesting you all kindly mute your mic. Myself, Kokila God, on behalf of Quality Council of India, I would like to welcome you to this webinar on the topic Clean is Green, Powering an Alternative Future under Swachh Bharat Mission. Brief about the program: increasing emission of greenhouse gases due to human activity worldwide have led to a substantial increase in atmospheric GHS concentration. As global electricity demand increases, governments are designing and implementing policies to scale up and catalyze renewable energy with alternative energy technologies. A critical component of this expanded deployment, there are, however, several factors apart from electricity and heat production that global GHS emission can be attributed to: agriculture, forestry, manufacturing, transportation, buildings, and other energies, making an imperative case of implementation of carbon management sustainability. The faculty for this webinar is Mr. Shankar Rajagopalan. He is a chemical engineer, BITS Pilani, and MBA University of Indianapolis, with over 36 years of experience in implementing cultural transformation in the SHE quality, sustainability, and business excellence space in diverse industries. This is a 90 minutes webinar with the question answer session. During the session, you are requested to mute your mic. Participant willing to ask question in between may raise their hand. There is an option available at the bottom for raising hand. I will name the participant who have raised hand one by one. Those participants may unmute themselves and ask their question. You can also write your question in the chat box. Now, before we start this session, let me give you a brief introduction about Quality Council of India. QCI was created in 1997 as an autonomous non-profit organization by Government of India through seed associations such as ASSOCHAM, CII, and FICCI to establish and operate national accreditation structure. The mission of QCI is to lead nationwide quality movement in India by involving all the stakeholders. The Department of Industry Policy and Promotion under Ministry of Commerce and Industry is a nodal point. The chairman of QCI is appointed by Honorable Prime Minister of India. At present, QCI is working under the dynamic leadership of Mr. Adil Jenulbhai, who is the QCI chairman, and Dr. R.P. Singh, who is the Secretary General. Accreditation facilitates trade by way of establishing equivalence and global acceptance of certification, inspection, testing being undertaken by various conformity assessment bodies in the area of quality, environment, food, safety, etc. This was accomplished by two of the Board of Quality Council of India. One is National Accreditation Board for Certification Body, and another one is National Accreditation Board for Testing and Calibration Laboratories, NABL. As the scope of accreditation grew beyond the traditional boundaries of conformity assessment into fields such as healthcare and education, QCI responded to this need by launching accreditation in these areas by establishing the National Accreditation Board for Hospital and Healthcare Providers, NABH, and National Accreditation Board for Education and Training, NABET, NABET. The accreditation boards on conformity assessment, the boards for healthcare and education too have international linkage for global acceptance. Other important tasks assigned to QCI has been to promote quality encompassing all segments including manufacturing, health, education, and public service. Mission of QCI to make nationwide quality a reality. National Board for Quality Promotion (NBQP) has been entrusted with the task of taking this forward and coordinating with all the stakeholders to promote quality in their respective areas of influence. NBQP also running QCI membership and consultant registration scheme. Apart from this, QCI also has special project groups that work with various ministries in government, both in center and at the state level. So first one is PPID, Project Planning and Implementation Division. PADD, Project Analysis and Documentation Division. Z, Zero Defect and Zero Effect, for the benefit of citizens and industry. ZQCI, along with industry stakeholder, has developed a standard called Workplace Assessment for Space Safety and Hygiene. That is, short form is WASH. And this PPID, we are in PPID, we are handling Swachh Bharat Mission 2021. So we are conducting this webinar under Swachh Bharat Mission only. I'm requesting you all, please mute your mic. QCI also has a training and capacity building, eQuest. eQuest, the e-learning portal of QCI. So you can visit to our website www.qcin.org for more detail. Now I would like to request Mr. Shankar R, sir, to carry on with the presentation. Over to Shankar, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for a wonderful introduction and a context to clean. It's great to be part of the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan under the PPID scheme. Welcome to all the participants on the call. It's an early morning call, I know, and I'm sure the people will be joining pretty soon. And thanks for the lovely introduction, Kokila. It's been nice to be part of the QCI. Good to be back. I hope all of you can see the slides and can hear me. I hope you're all doing good. So that's my context. That's where I come from, the various roles that I played, the various hats I've worn across time. You can see that there's been, as Kokila said, a little bit of tech transfer in Gharda Chemicals to manufacturing at Asian Paints to operations at Castrol, quality assurance, and HSSE and project management at BP. And that's where I got into alternative energy with GE, GE in the USA, GE Renewables. Also had a chance to build the wind turbine farms and the biggest wind farm in the world in Dhule, and was also part of the healthcare where I got into Dr. Reddy's, and also was into a refinery, a humongous refinery where we also did some bit on marine ecology. I was in Hospira, a Pfizer company, and did some smart cities with Tata projects. The last 3 years, I was setting up solar farms across the globe, and also been part of Tata projects where we've assessed and audited solar manufacturing companies. Was also part of the Tata BP Solar where we built solar lines. So that's a little bit of my green journey. But to speak a little bit about green, this is where I have had the experience of actually setting up alternative energy renewable projects, which doesn't really qualify me for this session, but this is again some way integrating a lot of what could happen. So today's context is interesting. There's a big theme we have out here and just less than 90 minutes to cover all of that. But what we have promised is a lot of stuff there, and to help you get through that, I will take you through an interesting session that will take you also through a green journey. And listen sharp to this. And like we said, there are some things that we promised to demystify the science of climate change. So that we will do. We'll try and explain what is climate change. So I think GHG and climate change is words that is used so frequently, it's become a buzzword of sorts. We'll also understand ways and approaches to carbon management. How can you actually measure baseline and also reduce your carbon footprint? We'll also try and put the global context.
Slides are changing, please. Slides are not changing.
Okay, which slide is this now? Can you see the opening slide? Clean is green.
Is the QCI slide which has been shown?
No, this is the opening slide only, the where your picture is coming with the.
Yeah, you can see it, right? So this is the slide, my friend. This is the slide, Ankur. This is the slide. We're talking of the theme. We're trying to stay with the agenda where we'll focus on outlining the global context and try and make a business case for renewables, right? If all of you can see the colorful slides with the QCI backdrop and the banner, can all of you see it? Is there anyone who cannot? Please raise your hand. So this is where the slides are progressing. This is a theme here under the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, under the Swachh Bharat mission.
Sir, this is visible, very well visible, sir.
Beg your pardon?
Yeah, it is visible, sir. It is visible. Thank you so much.
Okay. So friends, welcome once again. How are we managing in the times of the pandemic, in the times of the lockdowns and now the unlockdowns as we all get back to work, including QCI getting back to work from tomorrow? This is the end of all the offline webinars, the virtual meetings, and actually get back to work. There's been across the last few months, I know there's been heat waves and floods, there've been storms and cyclones across the west coast and the east coast happening more and more frequently of late. And of course, there's lots of uncertainties. I hope all of you are doing well. And as part of the extended QCI family, we wish you stay safe and hope you will plan and use safety every day. Okay, so I'll begin with a small context there. And this is about an experiment that was done at a lab. We are all in this journey together. So there was in an aquarium, and that's where we spoke of marine ecology, where there's fish, and there was small fish and big fish in the aquarium. The difference was the big fish was kept in one half of the aquarium and the small fish was kept in the other half, separated by a transparent glass. So the big fish could see the small fish. And what's the management theory? The big fish eats the small fish, right? That's what they tried here. And they tried hard but could not succeed. All they succeeded was battering the snout against the dividing glass. Slowly, the big fish learned that reaching the small fish is an impossible task and kind of gives up, resigns themselves to the fate. Then, and like experiment that happens now, like we have of late various experiments happening on the vaccines, when the glass partition is finally removed, carefully removed, what happens then? You would expect the big fish to start attacking and eating the small fish, right? That's what happens in the world. But surprisingly, nothing happened. They do not, and they kind of swim bravely around it. So this and comes from the place that this is a northern pike is the name of the fish, and this is the place where this is spoken about. This is the pike syndrome that wants us to beware of the perception of having complete knowledge of our surroundings. Our own perceptions can limit our ability to see changes that have occurred or to question the way that things have been done. So why am I mentioning these? At this point in time, when we are, I can say, in the transition, I'm sure that some of you have been through the wave theory. We've been through perhaps 2 waves is what they say, the scientists say, but in some of you in Delhi and NCR, I think you've been through 4 waves already. You had one last March, April and June, you had one in September, October, you had one in December, and you had one just now. So possibly the 4 waves have been through. You're through with the pandemic, you can say. But what happens? And as we speak, a lot of us, have been through the worst and we feel that all is well and we're back to our complacent selves. Friends, it's not over until it's over, they say. An important point to think also perceptions, and this also gives a good case to point to the discussion today. Are there things that are changed that can impact our performance? Are there some things that can be changed to improve our results? So this pause is about getting you to think about why you do things and the perception of change. So managing the perception of the safety and security of the people, the families in the times of the pandemic is what makes the big difference in life. With that at the context, I will also then talk about the next challenge. And you are aware of this in very ways. This elephant, when it is chained to this small kind of stick there, this anchored in the floor, do you think this can hold a big pachyderm? I'm sure it's the most powerful animal on earth. It can lift tons of weight. But how do you think this works? A small thing, how do you think it holds this elephant? It goes back to where, similar to the fish here, where it was chained to the post, where it is a small baby elephant. And as it grew up, it still felt that that is what can restrain it. So we should not become like the elephant. We have great power. We should use this power very appropriately. So that's the big expectation here for all of us to observe and take all the precautions here. Request all of us to mute the mics. If all of you can see the elephant and the fish, I guess you're with me. The slide transitions are working. Have you heard anything on the corona of late, apart from what we just said? You heard of this term called herd immunity, right? Anybody knows what it is all about? There's various theories that go about that say that after 2 waves, 3 waves, after achieving a particular percentage of vaccine coverage and a particular infection rate would drop, and therefore you would have less people who are carriers, less people infected. So there are infectious sources, there's healthy vaccinated people, there are exempted people, and there's infected people. So the herd immunity is something that works pretty well. Even as we speak, there are countries which are wanting to, can I have all mics on mute, please? There's a lot of background noise coming, which I think is affecting the clarity of the communication. Thank you so much. And also all the video off. We'll have a group photograph at the end. So what is this all about? And you know that some countries like England, they won a good football match the other day. They were planning to open up the lockdowns, and there was the variants, the Delta plus the Gamma variant also is coming. That's affected plans. But what is this all about? What is it? What is the one point when they say the pandemic will be over, when Corona or COVID-19 is the thing of the past? This is what they call the tipping point. What is the tipping point? The point at which a series of small changes or incidents becomes significant enough to cause a larger, more important change. A tipping point is defined as the critical point in the situation, process, or system beyond which a significant and often unstoppable effect or change takes place. Yeah. So what is the tipping point? It's the moment that something gains momentum, like the COVID-19 really peaked a couple of months back. Of the first time in life, I myself got locked down after being open in the last 14 months. This is what is called a tipping point. So in a sense, the definition of a tipping point is a turning point, a condition at which a small development causes major changes. So what is the context of the tipping point here? Yeah, it's similar to a kind of journey you have in going upwards, pushing up. You know, it's an uphill task for some of us. And once we reach the stage, it kind of is downhill. So that tipping point is that space where, you know, you have taken all the effort and gone from the bottom, worked up a momentum, reached the top, and with that the potential energy is maximum, then you come down. So this is essence is what is defined in some ways. The other context is it's also a point of no return beyond which you cannot come back. So once you go beyond that point, you cannot come back. So that is how the tipping point normally works. So it's like we said, a moment of critical mass. As an example, in the 70s, and it's happened in India, I can think of some ghettos and slums and the regional divides in the country in India also. But a lot of the suburbs, and this is the Black Lives Matter moving strongly now, kind of won't rest with the sentence. The whites were living in the older cities of Northwest America. When the number of incoming African Americans in a particular neighborhood reaches a particular point, say 20%, sociologists observe that the community would tip and most of the remaining whites would leave almost immediately. I'm not giving a local context, we can understand what this is all about. Yeah. And you know, we Indians have also been abroad, and in particular spaces, we established colonies, and we'd like to stay with like-minded people. And this is what is called a cultural tipping point. Innovation in the marketplace, and you can think of the various gadgets that you have. The tipping point comes in where the early adopters suddenly kind of peek in, and everyone wants a particular gadget and equipment, an iPhone, a GoPro, and there's some shoes that have suddenly been used by some celebrities like the Hush Puppies become very popular. So this is something similar in the marketplace also, the innovation adoption curve. Suddenly something goes like a rage, becomes very popular. Yeah. For example, the use of the masks in the past, in the parts of the country, people used to use dust masks, and suddenly since March 2020, it's gone viral, as they say. So it's like in the marketplace, there is the technology enthusiasts, the visionaries, the pragmatists, the conservatives, the skeptics, and the chasm, the gap, and that's where is the big divide, and that's where the entire change happens. So what is it all about? And this is the kind of example that we're giving here, but the tipping point also comes in adopting technology. You know, some of you are young people, have used technology very well. You are comfortable with smartphones, you are IT enabled, you can use the entire platform, use digital as a mode to get and mine data. Some of the oldies are not so tech savvy. So that's again the difference there, from the technology early adopters to the tech professional mainstream to the digital life. And that's the kind of swing that takes place. This is the traditional technologies and the traditionalists, the technophobes, the guys who are anti-technology, and that's the challenge there. The lead versus the laggards, the early adopters versus the late majority, and this is the tipping point there here. Okay, so this is again another example there. So what is the context here? And the context obviously is the tipping point. We're talking of climate change. So the tipping point of climate change is what? The tipping point occurs when the global heating pushes temperatures beyond a critical threshold, leading to accelerated and irreversible impacts. That's the imperative word here. The impacts of climate change are, friends, irreversible. And you must have heard of a big ice sheet that came up and got dislodged a couple of months back. There are some large ice sheets in Antarctica there are thought of already past the tipping points, meaning large levels of sea levels would rise. There'll be continents and countries and islands that get flooded. So this, friends, is the other big reality that is facing all of us, and that's called climate change. So the tipping points have occurred throughout the Earth's history, and parts of the Earth systems are currently monitored for abrupt change. And what are the previous tipping points? The great oxygenation. We're talking of oxygen, and a lot of you have done a lot of hard work to get oxygen for needy people. So this is what got molecular oxygen into the atmosphere. And so also snowball event where the ice kind of covered the entire Earth's surface. The West Antarctic ice sheet, the regional feature that happens, you hear of it very recently and very regularly. It's being monitored for signs of collapse. When that happens, and you heard of the challenges you faced even in India, in Uttarakhand, when the glacier kind of melted. So that's another tipping point here. So what is the tipping point of logistics? You're aware of this equipment here. And what is it? This is the EV, and the electric car, the electric vehicle is the one that is supposed to be the answer to climate change we speak. Lower costs, health benefits, better efficiency, supports the green transition. It has reduced emissions, and that is the way forward. Is that the answer? But what powers the EV? The EV can save a lot of consumers money, and there could be challenges like having charging points, and there would be, of course, some repair and operation maintenance cost, and the range, some of the challenges there. But what is it that powers the EV? The electric vehicle also needs some charging. Where does that come from? So unless that comes from a green source, this is just a kind of tip of the iceberg there. So at what point will it reach its tipping point is the other question. So carbon emissions, as the typical break-even point, some of you financial analysts will know that that's called the MAC curve, the abatement curve of carbon in the context here. So this is where the EVs become cleaner than fossil fuel vehicles. So this is the other big thing that happens there. So the tipping points of climate change, you can see in the Weather Bureau, you can see a lot of the changes happening. The wind patterns, there was the Suez Canal blocked, and there's the effect of the warm oceans and the blue ocean coming in there. So there have been many points that have raised the alarm. There's been challenges, and there have been sequencing events that's happened. So some of the recent tipping points you can talk of: the Amazon rainforest has been through frequent droughts. The Arctic sea ice has seen reduction in the area. The Atlantic circulation is on the previous slide has resulted in a slowdown since the 1950s. The boreal forest, the fires are happening, the pests are changing. The coral reefs, I was in a refinery where one of the main challenges was managing the coral reef. The Great Barrier Reef also is under this worst kind of inflection point in life with this damage that's been inflicted on them in Australia. The Greenland ice sheet, the ice law that's accelerating, and so on. So these are some of the tipping points that is really raising the alarm, and they are happened in the last decade. There is also the effect of the domino, and something like you say you have an earthquake in Indonesia, you would have a tsunami thereof that hits the east coast of India. So that could be a domino effect thereof. So the elements that you need to worry about, and if you look at a kind of graph here, the blue is the one that has gradual changes, and the pink has most immediate threats. So you can see a lot of pink out there, and it's largely about the ice and the sea ice that's kind of disappearing and melting. And then, of course, there is the threshold, there is the ocean and the disrupted circulations there. So a lot of these are what result in major challenges in the overall scenario out here. Okay, so this tells you about the global warming vulnerable tipping points, and this speaks about the effect of what happens there. And this is you can see it in a kind of glance there, from the boreal forest to locally the Indian summer monsoon. You can see the summer is growing hotter and hotter. Cut to the Middle East, I think you've seen the statistics. The Middle East is hotter than ever. Kuwait has had the highest temperature ever. It's gone beyond 50, they recorded 52, expected to hit 60. The West African monsoon, the Amazon rainforest, the El Nino, the Southern Oscillation, all these are typical cascading tipping points. So the committed global warming greater than 2%, the temperature there, we'll speak a little bit about that, commits most likely past tipping points, and that's the big challenge there. So these are some of what you're seeing happening: the oceans heating, acidification, deoxygenation, and that's what will affect the marine life also. So in the stratosphere troposphere exchange, there is various scenarios that is there, and there's an estimated time needed to trigger social tipping as we speak to get this in control. And that's why this session is all about awareness on what is clean and making a business case for clean. And there is a lead from between the way the human settlements have progressed to reducing the fossil fuel subsidies to making also energy storage is critical here, to decentralize energy generation, to have carbon neutral cities, smart cities, something that we're talking about, to have a divestment of forest fuel, to also look at GHG information disclosure. And you can see that some countries have really been focusing on that. Shell and some companies have been asked to disclose the carbon footprint, Netherlands also. So this is some of the challenges that's happening. You can see that the tipping point of climate change talks of innovation trying to backdrop stabilization. You can see the challenge in time frames there. A very rapid degradation could be 1 year, and a rapid transition could take 5 or 10 years. A slow would be 10, 30, and a very slow could take 30 years. They say the pandemic has slowed down the economy, but the speed at which we kind of get back is also something that is not very nice to talk about. Okay. So once again, to summarize, what is the tipping point of climate change? You understood what is the tipping point. So it is a threshold that when exceeded can lead to large changes in the state of the system. There have been various potential tipping points in the physical climate system that's impacted ecosystems. The feedback from the global carbon cycle is a driver for the transition between the glacial and the interglacial periods. We'll understand that in some deeper context, with the orbital forcing providing the initial trigger. The Earth's geological temperature record, we'll see that also, includes many more examples of rapid transitions. The tipping point is all about global warming and talks about the feedback in the climate's carbon cycle and the planetary reflectivity that can trigger a lot of tipping points and lead to a hothouse climate state. Yeah, so that is the reason why this is something that we need to be all aware about. It's not just the Greenland and the Antarctic there. The effects of that can see 10 meters plus multiples of 10 meters of sea level rise. You can see the impact of that. A lot of vacation holidays that we used to go to might no longer be available once travel starts. So these are some of the tipping points. And like I said, these are all irreversible. I hope you're with me, and we'll try and get you to the heart of the matter, the science of climate change. I pause for you to see and have a look at the entire, so well articulated visual on climate change. And you can see that the science of global warming, what's called the greenhouse gas effect, it began with the Industrial Revolution in 1750. And what are the GHGs? It talks of methane, carbon dioxide, of course, nitrous oxide, and CFCs. You can see that also well there. And we can say that the effects of these CO2 especially last for decades. It's also about livestock. You can see the animals there, a cow, that also where there is a lot of animal farming, that's where the generation of methane also creates its own addition to the GHGs. There is man-made CFCs, the chlorofluorocarbons, and you can see that's coming up in the sprays. And there is, there is challenges that's happening from then to now. There's been a particulate matter increase, and you can see that how, as mankind, how are we adding it, the travel, the logistic that we have, how all the GHGs kind of trap the heat, and how the life on the earth needs to be sustained. It has come a long way. It's a fine balance now, and the temperature difference before and after the balance could be as small as 0.47 degrees. So this is a nice visual, also speaks about the effect of the GHGs in a nice manner, how the ozone layer depletion can affect the radiation, and also how the water, the seawater, absorbs 90% and ice reflects 90%. So a very nice visual that explains all of it. We'll also then try and see a little bit of statistics. So what is climate change here? Okay, so what is climate change? So there is, like I said, a climate change is a shift in climate relative to a given reference time period. The reference time period could be a lot bigger than you think of. There are, of course, natural factors, the solar variability, the volcanic dust levels, the geological change, and there is, of course, the human factors, the greenhouse gases, like we spoke about, the aerosols, the ozone depletion, and the changes in the land use. So the three questions that get to climate change. The first is about detection. Is the climate changing, and on what time scale? Some of the people like Donald Trump said it's all hogwash and he exited from the Paris Agreement. So is the atmospheric composition actually changing? Is the physical climate actually changing? You have the answers from the patterns that you can see in temperatures, the monsoons, the kind of, the storm, cyclone that's happening of late. So that's again one answer there. The attribution is the second part. What is the cause of the observed climate changes? What causes the natural variation of climate? How is the atmospheric condition or the composition linked to climate change? So there has to be a cause and effect, right? It cannot be unrelated. So that's the other big connect there. Prediction. What are the projections? How is climate going to change in the future? What are the future projections and what are the impacts going to be? I think these three questions are what will really help us get to climate change. Okay, so this is called the anthropogenic emissions of GHGs, and it spoke about all of these. You can see that the ppm is all measured as CO2 equivalent, and on the right is some of the protocols from the Kyoto to the Montreal where it measures these. So what is all about? What is the ppm equivalents? You have carbon dioxide, major component of air. You got methane, stratosphere, water vapor, nitrous oxide, the halocarbons, the gases, and they got the names from the summits, the protocols that's come in there. The troposphere, ozone, all these are some of what happens there. So the total atmospheric radiative force equivalent of 408 ppm is what comes in there. So is the climate changing and at what scale? Is the atmosphere composition changing? So the CO2 levels you can see in the graphs there is peaking up. You can see the methane also going up. You can also see the scale on the x-axis on the time scale. So the CO2 levels were never this high as in the last 650,000 years. So that's the kind of rate of change across where it is measured. So is the atmospheric composition changing? It's a big yes. You can see the nitrous oxide, the radiative forcing, the methane also compared to the carbon dioxide. You can see the change in the atmospheric composition. Some of us might not observe it on the big, displays the pollution control board puts up what you see on the wordings there. So is the climate changing and at what scale? Is the physical climate actually changing? So the level warmest years in record since 1880 have all occurred since 1998, and all but one happened since 2000. And you can think of this year with what's happening in Kuwait, like I said. So 2017 was one of the hottest years in record, and 2016 was the hottest El Nino year ever. The oceans also are warming, and therefore this graph tells you that temperatures have been increasing in the 20th century. And you can see that it's happening as a combination of the land separately, the ocean and the land and ocean. You can see the overall physical climate is on the up. Yeah, this is one graph that is getting into the red sphere. So what is the cause of observed climate changes? What causes the natural variations of climate? And you can see this across the timeline where we had the dinosaurs. This is the pre-Jurassic era. You had the Himalayan forms that came in. And that's when we landed up on the planet, the Homo sapiens. So you can see the entire change, tectonic shifts. So over millions of years, the geological processes control the climate of the Earth. And over the last 60 million years, the Earth's climate has actually significantly cooled. You can see the entire temperature there in degrees centigrade. You can see the temperature has come down. The timeline is million years. Okay, so this is where it's actually at a very inhabitable era that we are in. We're lucky to be at this point in time separated from the dinosaurs. So at the time when it is actually livable in some parts of the world at least. So what are the causes of observed climate changes? What causes the natural variations of climate? And there is, again, we're going back to the interglacial and then the ice age and then today. So over the last 100,000 years, changes in the orbital parameter of the Earth have driven changes in the climate. We can see the eccentricity, the parabolic kind of obliquity that happens also has resulted in the shift. So there are various reasons there. It's not just one. To try to give you the context there for a learned audience, over the last 400,000 years, the Earth has gone through 4 ice ages. Okay, that's been the challenge there, and you can see that across this, the temperature also has been varying. Cut to the observed climate changes and what causes the natural variations of climate. So there is the medieval warm period, there is a little ice age, and there's the industrial revolution. The current warming is likely to be unprecedented over the time scale because during the last millennium, the climate change has shown natural variability, although the current conditions are unusual. So in the last 1,000 years, the Earth's climate has gone through centennial changes. So that's been the big change and the big challenge there. So you can see that the natural variation of the climate also have taken a pattern, and that's why we see the real peak in global warming, what we call. So what is the cause of observed climate changes from the atmospheric composition? And we spoke about the, the ozone layer. We speak about the reflection, the solar radiation as it comes in, and the reflection, the atmospheric absorption of the infrared radiation, and that's where the ozone layer comes in peak. Those are reflections from the ice and mountains. You can see the statistics there. The radiation from the earth, the infrared radiation comes in there. So the overall energy equilibrium occurs at an average terrestrial temperature around 15 degrees centigrade. Okay, the incoming short wavelength energy from the sun equals outward radiation of infrared energy. So that balance is very critical there. What happens when there's higher GHG concentration? It increases the re-radiation of energy towards the Earth's surface. So that is a decreased net outward flow, and therefore the average terrestrial temperature rises until a new equilibrium is established. So due to the physical properties, the GHGs largely determine the global temperature of the planet. So this is what we're trying to give you a context of why climate change is very dependent on the GHGs that you emit. A carbon lifestyle, a green carbon lifestyle, therefore, is what we need. So again, what is the model then? What next? The increase in GHGs is the only viable explanation for the temperature range. So this change is largely because of GHGs, and this is scientifically kind of coming through. And while I can kind of summarize this in one statement, this is important to get you through. From the Democrats to Republicans to all the doubters in the team, solar forcing is known well, and it's simply not enough to account for the warming. Volcanic eruptions are also one reason, but it's not strong enough. So the variability in the simulations have shown that the change has been, the with and without human forcing, our intervention on the planet has resulted in some effect there. But largely you can see that this is, despite the forcing, it's only the climate models that can explain the observed warming trends. So to summarize, definitely global warming is something that all of you and me are responsible for. So what then are the options? What is the tipping point? What is the future projection of climate change? So that's the important, I know you're looking forward to understand more on what is this. So what is the RCP? There are 4 RCPs there. The RCP is the representative concentration pathway. So what is the RCP? So it is the greenhouse gas concentration, not emissions. It's a trajectory adopted with 4 pathways that's used to model these. And the pathways describe different climate features, all of which are considered possible depending on the volume of GHGs emitted in the years to come. So after a session like this, if you go back and think of how we can be green citizens, then there might be a change, a shift in the, I think 200 plus people are registered, the more coming in. So what are these RCPs? There are 4 possible scenarios there based on the relative radiative forcing values. The lowest emission pathway is the one that will ensure that the ppm CO2 equivalent stays, at a slightly lowered trend. The lower pathway, the lower RCP has this in the green. The higher one is what shows in the blue, and the black one is the worst case scenario. So you can see what is the end point of all this. So the CO2 concentrations across all the scenarios are projected to rise in all of these. So across these 4 scenarios, it's still going to rise. So climate change is a given. It's reached the tipping point already. So there is nothing much that we can talk about if or but. It is past that curve. So we reach the tipping point. Is there something then we can do to reduce the impact? And that then is the next question that we can take up. So what are the impacts then? And there are scenarios. As we speak, we are getting into the business as unusual, to business as usual. We're trying to get back to offices. We're trying to get back to the work that we do. We're getting back to the life as usual, trying to get back to our careers as usual, right? So similar scenario is the business as usual scenario, where we continue doing what we're doing at the typical RCP 8.5, the black scenario. It is not likely to exceed 4 degrees is what they say. Emissions, the correct rates could kind of go as high as that. With some mitigation, the emissions could rise to, 2 degrees, and a strong mitigation could, hold it within 2 degrees, less than that. And aggressive mitigation could halve the emissions by 2050 at RCP 2.6, and will not definitely get beyond 2 degrees. So you can see that the impact of these is tremendous. And our world potential, like we say, we are not inherited this earth from our forefathers or our parents. We have borrowed it from our children and our grandchildren. So therefore, it's important that the steps we take after we complete this green webinar is important here. We can see the shift that is happening. The reduced risk of tipping points and irreversible change is what is importantly here. We need to really look at how we can reduce the after effect of all these, and we want to ensure that the sea levels don't rise, and we need to ensure that the summers are in good state, there are no heat waves, and that's the reason why this is critical here. So these are some of the challenges there. So I hope that gave you a good context on climate change, and all of us, there are various things we can do after this. We can break up, go back, but also important that we be aware of these realities there and also know that we have a role to play. There was one point in time when I also was not so well evolved. A couple of movies I watched, An Inconvenient Truth kind of led me to realize the impact of every simple action that we do, to the extent of even keeping the TV off on a remote or set-top box, put it off by the remote, the red button, and that stays and the afterglow remains all day. You never put off some things, right? And that's where I realized that you need to switch off something. Simple things like that, converting to LEDs, saving power, saving water, saving energy. So these are some of the challenges there. And one day we could possibly need to look out for property at the Antarctica, because we will have global warming that kind of hits us so badly you don't know where to go. Yeah, so that is some of the challenges that we face. And let's kind of also quickly demystify the greenhouse gas emissions. So what are the GHGs? We understood that in some ways, the impact of that. So once again, to repeat, the sun comes in, there is some solar radiation that hits the Earth's surface and the atmosphere, and some of it is reflected back. So there is the half of the solar radiation is absorbed by the Earth's surface and it warms it. Also the water bodies. The infrared radiation is emitted from the Earth's surface and it goes back. And the greenhouse gas effect, some of the infrared radiation passes through the atmosphere, but most of it is absorbed and re-emitted in all directions by the GHGs, molecules and clouds. The effect of these comes back and hits the Earth's surface and results in warming the Earth's atmosphere and the lower atmosphere. So that in effect is the impact of GHG emissions and the impact of the global warming. So what are the GHGs you understood? It's also like they say, you think another myth is, they say that the largest hole in the ozone layer is closed because of the pandemic, because of the lockdown. I wish that were true. That also is not. Even if that were partly true, the rate at which we get back to business as usual, the rate at which the traffic snarls, as we came back today, the traffic has kind of peaked. The gentleman who brought me to work said this is a tough traffic area, don't go by this route. So this is about, importantly, the reason to realize that this is an irreversible change that's happened. So we need to ensure that we make climate consciousness stick. This is like the stickiness factor. It's a unique quality. I mentioned that movie that I saw, the Aldous Huxley movie, that made me change as a person. There are some points in time, tipping points in life when you suddenly realize that you got to be safe, that you got to be wearing a seatbelt, use the appropriate route to transport to work, perhaps pool, switch off something, save power, save water, close the tap. So what is it that works? So this is the unique quality that propels the phenomenon to stick in the minds of the public and influence their future behavior. So it's often counterintuitive or contradictory to the prevailing conventional wisdom. So all of us, we see we have unlimited water supply. You can see a lot of the cities in India are facing a water scarcity like never before. There is challenges, the water level degradation, there's an aquifer that's kind of getting contaminated. And of course, there is the challenges we face on the energy. The energy kind of, it's not going to be forever. So that's some of the challenges we face. So this is importantly a need and a call for all of you. This session is to make climate consciousness stick. And there is no time from the time that Obama began betting on the clean tech billions to Justin Trudeau, who said that COVID relief, including last year to now, they said only if you disclose climate change impacts. It's about also disclosing climate change impacts. And there's something that we can try and get back. It's sometimes irreversible, but we're going to build back. And that's what is the challenge that the world is headed. So some of the, what mankind has done in the past, we got to kind of work back and try and make it, there's no biding time in the renewable future. So with that at the learning, so let's try and get back to some lockdowns learning, the secrets of sustainable success on how we can stay fit, be safe, be sustainable. Some RX is there. and we try and give you a context on sustainability. I think a lot of us have different views. The boys think it differently, the girls think it differently. It's kind of gender agnostic. So how do we see sustainability? A large part of what we see is like the blind men see the elephant. Are we wrong? Perhaps not. It's like all of us, see it in a different part, but all of us are right. In a sense, what does this say? That all that we do, simple drops in the ocean, also can help mitigate climate change, and all of us need to do a bit. Anything you do, a simple action as a green champion helps, and that's why sustainability is again like the Ganesha, where it's like the elephant god. It's a god of sustainability. Let's also try and demystify the sustainability triple bottom line. Some of you have been through this, but on popular demand, we'll try and do this. So triple bottom line is what's called the environmental, the social, and the governance, or the environmental, financial, and social. It begins with the economic, the financial. It talks about various parameters that affect the economic prosperity as compared to the profitability. It's revenue growth, productivity, profit margin, the return on investment, capital costs, risk management, the valuation of enterprise. Some of you on the call are from listed companies, and also the appeal to the investors. This is measured by the economic performance, and a lot of the FCNA team would be busy making the annual report that talks about the economic performance. Life sometimes goes QSQT, quarter se quarter tak, but again, that's the big learning there. There's also the social part of enterprise. You can't do business without taking care of the community, including our internal employees, the health and safety, fair compensation, equal opportunity, education, recognition. This is measured by the social equity and it's called the social performance. The connect between the social and the financial is called the equitable. And the third bottom line is the environmental, that looks at not just the green part as we speak, but the energy and water consumption, the materials that we generate, waste, transport, the emissions and waste, the operational design efficiencies, new products, service opportunities, and the entire life system's impact. The connect between the social and this is the environmental stewardship measured by the environment performance. The environmental and social connect is called bearable, and the one that connects the environmental and the financial is called the viable. So the soft spot is the one that is connecting all three, the equitable, bearable, and viable is called the triple bottom line. So the addition of the social and the environmental, the traditional, financial, or the economic is what is used to holistically measure companies, countries' progress. It's called long-term sustainability. It's also known as the profits, the people, and the planet. So this is the three P's we talk about, and that is what is called on other terms also ESG. These together combine are the three factors that help determine the quality of governance and risk management. That's the processes that is prevalent in any company, in any country. They provide insight into the long-term prospects that is used by investors and all stakeholders, including employees. If you want to join a company from a campus, you would understand the company from a holistic approach, how it treats people, how it manages the planet, and how it obviously delivers on the return on investment. So this, friends, is a triple bottom line, and this is the typical explanation there. I hope this gives you a context of what is this. So the people, planet, and profit is the connector, and sustainability is the meeting point of the needs of the present without compromising on the ability of future generations to meet their needs. And that talks of the economic profit, the social people, and the environmental planet. And this is the connector there. There's a lot of mega trends you're talking of. So we're talking of the pandemic here. Is it a threat or an opportunity, you could say? And I spoke about some impacts of climate change, and that's why it's got on the global agenda. It's also competition on water. That expectation the company will go beyond providing goods and give, looking at social problems. Investors also looking at getting more active on ESG. Regulations will get tighter. So these are some of the big tickets there. And we spoke about the three P's of sustainability, the profits, the people, and the planet. It's also the triple bottom line, I can say, what we spoke about, giving equal weight. It's also the fourth one that talks of the purpose. And I guess this is, like we mentioned a couple of sessions ago, the why you're doing what you're doing. So it has to connect with your vision, your cause, your purpose. If you go ahead and do something, there has to be a purpose. Today's session is all about making a pitch for cleaner and greener, and that's connected to the purpose. So organizationally, a quadruple bottom line, the four P's, it also adds a fourth component called the purpose or principles. A cause without an inspiring purpose, strategy often fades from active consideration. It also brings in a sharper focus on governance and a respect for the culture. So when you try and look at the company, the organization, the country you're in, try and see how we can connect with the purpose. A lot of preservation that goes through all of it, like we mentioned, the business as usual scenarios and also the career and life as usual as part of the lockdown started from 2020 and is opening up now. So this is some of the, in a sense, the short and long of sustainability. This I wanted to kind of cover so that you're able to understand sustainability also from a triple bottom line perspective there. Okay, and like Lord Ganesha, the ABCD of sustainability. So what are the ABCDs of sustainability? I'll quickly take you through this journey there. So air pollution is a major health risk. You can see that in the last 8 months, there's been some improvement in the respiratory air quality. People are wearing masks for different reasons earlier, but it's important that they understand the statistics and why air is important. The air we breathe got slightly better over the time. Biodiversity, you see a lot of animals and flora and fauna. There's been a kind of biodiversity inclusion. We kind of have intruded on their spheres. So this signifies the vibrant mix of life forms, and it's important we celebrate that. Climate change obviously is also reflected by the biodiversity. Some of the animals species, leaving, I spoke about the coral reefs, also impacts the biodiversity. You've seen the challenges, how it's happened from the time of the dinosaurs. So greater diversity of species ensures natural biodiversity in all forms. We spoke about climate change largely. This is the fulcrum of this meeting. The rise in the GHG gases is what is altering the natural climatic rhythms and is visible as extreme weather, floods, rising sea levels, all of which are causing irreversible damage to the habitat. And the reason why we are speaking about clean and green is for climate change. D is for deforestation, the third largest contributor of GHGs, and forests that were once enveloped half the planet now covers only 1/4. That's WWF stats. So that's the impact of deforestation. I'll quickly take you through some of the terms that you'll hear on the ESG journey. That's the Earth Hour, celebrated every year on the 27th of March, where you inspire people. We spoke about simple things we can do. Make every day an Earth Hour day where you switch off lights where you don't need it. Some of you kind of reflect and understand that it's a token that you kind of 1 hour kind of put off all the lights, switch off something. You can do that more often as appropriate here. Also, the food we eat, you understand that there is the animals and the kind of cultivation. You see, you also are aware some of the last events, the couple of Oscars have been totally green, no meat, there's artificial meat that's coming in. So there's also the, farm to fork kind of cycle that looks at the total distance that the food travels on the field to the plate. So this also is important for us to eat local. It all began with the wet markets of Wuhan, they say. So also important to think of how we eat local, what is appropriate, what is healthy, and also try and look at the GHG component of the food mile that goes into the transit of the food. So try and eat local stuff. Don't kind of go for exotic stuff that is got in from a long distance. We'll speak about this in a couple of moments, but HEVs is also, we spoke about the electric vehicles and it runs the hybrids also. It's expected to kind of increase, but there's a market there. We'll speak about that. Sustainability is all about innovation. It's joined at the hip. If you want to continuously improve, we got to have more and more people without resource degradation. So innovation is a must. Finding different ways like the LED, how to reduce. As we speak today, there's a power cut and I use a solar light, a small solar light to kind of help me in this journey there. This kind of is the one that I use. So this is innovation is something that we must try and adopt in every way of life. There's a shrub that produces small seeds which contain oil that can be used as fuel. You had one flight that you had even in India that was also done on biofuels. There's challenges by which the aviation turbine fluid can kind of be replaced. Partial replacement also is fine. How we can reduce the need for fossil fuels. This is a term that we have seen, and like I promised, the Kyoto Protocol, it's a legally binding agreement under which 37 industrialized nations agreed to reduce the collective emissions and greenhouse gases by 5.2% as compared to the base year of 1990. This was, of course, until 2012. This is one milestone that we went past. That's the one Kyoto Protocol. We also have the Montreal Protocol, like I spoke, but it's about an agreement with the conference of parties and people get together. The developing nations take targets to reduce. It's also be important to be literate, and some of us know this. So this session is also about educating as part of the Swachh Bharat mission to understand all of you to understand terms, particularly on ESG. It's an off-use term called materiality. It signifies the potential of an issue to impact the organization's commercial success, in fact, the globe success, and its importance among stakeholders. So who is the stakeholder in this journey of climate change? It's all of us. Yeah, it's not. Yeah. So what is materiality for us? And therefore, climate change is one materiality that is kind of happening. This session is all about telling you why climate change is so big and what are the important consequences if we don't take precautions. The megawatt, the savings of the megawatt by reducing consumption or increasing efficiency is termed as the megawatt. You heard of the megawatt, there's a difference there. The organic, all of us tend to go organic. The principle of organic is to produce without use of pesticides or chemical fertilizers. And that's the important need to have organic farms. Population is booming, and the more people we produce, the more challenges we'll have in managing equity, including vaccines, including life, including healthcare. The quality and sustainability are well connected. The carbon footprint is a product of one of the measures of quality. We always say recycle, like the simple things that you can do. You know, you have a recycling bin, you have recycling waste. All of us tend to throw our garbage every day. There's a plastic that goes out. Can we kind of stock up and ensure that we throw it once it fills up rather than dispose it every day? You know, plastic bag doesn't cost much, but the effort we can take to reduce the recycling, quantity, the plastic that go into it can really help in combating climate change. Even 1 ton of paper recycled can save 7,000 gallons of water and save around 20 trees. That's the thing that we can, small things we can do to recycle. Stakeholders, all of us, fellows, Americans, Romans, countrymen, Indians, a person, group, or organization that affects or can be affected by organization actions as a stakeholder. To be sustainable, we must carry all stakeholders along, not just the shareholders. So a stakeholder is all people on whom there is an impact of what we do, our actions. So it's important in all this is called stakeholder capitalism. It's inclusive. The entire journey of sustainability is inclusive. And the triple bottom we spoke about, this is about the people, planet and profit. Upcycle, another term as compared to downcycle, is the process of converting waste materials or useless materials into new materials. You see a lot of people in the backdrops have upcycled material of better quality and higher environmental value. The volatile organic compounds also results in fire safety and explosive natures of hazardous gases emitted from certain solids or liquids, such as paints, printers, adhesives, etc. They are, of course, some of them are fairly toxic, but have chronic effects on human health. The VOCs and the water, of course, is without water, the life would not exist. It's a prerequisite for humans and economic development. Wastage and rampant water pollution are precipitated in the water crisis. There is the X term, the xeriscaping, a water efficient landscaping technique utilizing unthirsty native plants and drought tolerant exotics. When you talk of carbon sequestration and planting trees, the month of June is the month of environment and sustainability. What kind of trees do we plant? So looking at how you can use water efficient landscaping. Who can make the change? It is you. You need to be the change. That's the words of Mahatma Gandhi himself. Be the change that you want to be. Every one of us needs to contribute towards sustainability. A small drop makes a mighty ocean. Every act counts. Transformation is nothing but a summation of a billion small acts. So don't stop at this webinar. Continue after that and look at this journey of zero harm, zero waste. So this is the A to Z of sustainability. Like we spoke about the major mega forces, the enterprise risks, you can see climate change and CO2 is always at the top. The pandemic perhaps is something not there. You can see that this is there on the top quadrant always. And there's a relevance of sustainability. Without that, there is no business. The sustainability game is also about, as we speak, the COVID sport. Official sport is wear a mask, wear gloves, and the COVID can attack anyone within 6 feet. Again, a reminder, all of you in a clean and green mission. The cleanliness and cleanliness also will help us be better protected, be safer, be healthier. So what have we been doing in the pandemic? And it's also about, the kind of time we spent in follow-up. That's the blue graph, and actually time to do value-added stuff. This is a Pareto. If you spend 20% of your time on the critical few action that we can take, it will result in great results and try and get the climate change mitigated. Okay, that's about carbon management. So like we said, materiality is critical here. So what is it? Is there a case for renewables? And I come in from a background in solar. So the photovoltaic cell is a solid state device that converts sunlight into electricity. This is tapping the heat of the sun into power, and this is how it works, converting through a source. There's a cell, there's a module that comes in, there's an array that kind of gets adjusted to the light of the sun, like a wind turbine blade gets adjusted to the direction of the wind and ensures that it converts it to a DC power through inverter that's converted to AC and is fed to the grid. Looking at storage options, but this is what is material for all of us. Is there a case for renewables? And I'm a big fan of renewable energy, be it a wind turbine farm or a solar. These are two options, the most two common ways of getting, So what does the wind sock say? What does the wind clock say? Where do we go from here? What are the directions, the east, west, north, south? Which are the directions? Where does mankind go from this tipping point? some of the challenges we face and the questions that we answer will get us to where we are. Last year, around this time, there was the Naya Bharat Ka Naya Josh. There was Mr. Mukesh Ambani, who had explained, his direction of the biggest enterprise, the richest man in the world, who said in the 43rd annual meeting that Reliance aims to become net carbon zero by 2035. So that's at its maiden virtual shareholder meet this time last year. They said that Reliance will remain a user of crude oil and natural gas, but it is committed to embracing new technologies to convert its carbon dioxide emissions into useful products and chemicals. A very visionary statement. And what for Reliance is the new oil? And this is what they said last week in the statement at the next GM, that's the AGM, the 44th, the Reliance to invest rupees 75,000 crores in clean energy and build 4 gigafactories. So they set up a platform for renewable energy to finance long-term global capital. You can see that this group has always been pretty foresightful, and they know, if you know where to bet on, if you are a shareholder, you know where to invest, not talking about the rest. So this is the new direction there. And a lot of players have kind of decided to go green. There's a big push and they're pulling the plug on the typical, fossil fuel kind of emissions. So what's the end game? Our end game is to go beyond carbon neutral. It's not just in finishing, and there's been some of what we've seen across the globe. It's not just carbon neutrality. You see the tipping point there. You see the challenges that we face in various scenario. We got to go beyond. We got to think beyond. It's beyond compliance, beyond the approaches. You got to really think beyond the ABC of sustainability, and that's been the challenge there. So you got to really launch a carbon footprint action plan in all our homes across the entire companies we work with to manage the carbon footprint. Why do we need to measure and manage carbon footprint? Various reasons there. There is enough of, we spoke about the various agreements, the Kyoto and the Paris agreements, and we need to understand, we need to align with the sustainable development goals. We will try and be a little brief in this because we will talk about this in a full day webinar that a lot of you have said, but I'll try and speak about the carbon footprint, how we define the CO2 basis. So you see that there's a lot of water vapor in the atmosphere. There is a percentage of CO2 and others, the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. In the overall anthropomorphic or the man-made greenhouse gases, 84% is comprised by CO2, and then there is methane, nitrous oxide, and the fluorinated gases. So these are the carbon footprint intensive greenhouse gases. So these are the CO2 ones. They're all measured in CO2 equivalent. Okay, each of these, the methane, nitrous oxide, others are measured in CO2 equivalent, and the various standards, and it's also this thing we talk about, the scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions. What is it? Let me try and give you a little bit of understanding on that. It's also on the scope of today's section. The direct emissions that come from the activities within your control, within your boundaries, you can say within your fence, within your perimeters, is direct emissions. The indirect emissions comes in from any electricity, heat or steam that you may purchase or use. The scope 3 is other indirect emissions from outside sources outside your direct control, to the supply chain, materials that comes into you. So these are the typical standards there. So, and there's a lot of standards that you could measure. There's ISO standards and there's the GHG product life cycle, which looks at how we can measure this in different ways. But to warm up to the global potential. So what is the global warming potential? So the basis, like I said, the CO2 by definition has a global warming potential of 1. Methane is estimated to have a global warming potential of 28 to 36. The nitrous oxide has a GWP of 265 to 298. The CFCs, the HFCs, the hydrofluorocarbons, the hydrochlorofluorocarbons, perfluorocarbons, the PFCs, and other SFCs, SF6 are high GPW gases. So these can be thousands or tens of thousands. You can see the reason why the emissions of these gases, if you look at the kind of contribution they have, the global warming potential is intense. So that's the reason why we need to understand the global warming potential. How do you measure carbon footprint? Each of these can be measured with the 3 scopes. Direct is scope 1. The emissions from purchased electricity is scope 2, and other indirect emissions is scope 3. Once again, these are the ones that's owned by controlled by your company. Purchase is what comes in, and scope 2 normally measures what physically occurs at the facility where the electricity is purchased, your factory, your industry, or project sites. Other indirect emissions, they allow for the treatment of other indirect emissions. They are And the consequences of the activities of the companies but occur from sources not owned or controlled by the company, your subcontractors, vendors, contractors, the entire value chain, supply chain, all these are probably scope 3. So you can see in a typical value chain that is, as part of the QCIC and various quality mappings is the input and the output, what you do. So this is the entire value chain. So across the value chain is got to scope all of that. You got to put the boundaries there. So in a typical value chain, you have, the full cycle of producing raw materials. You process the usable form, you transport it, and then you kind of construct it, a typical manufacture it, and then there's a preoccupation, then there's a kind of refurbishment that comes in.
So reason question is reason spike the reason
Yeah.
spike
Yes, guys, that's
a reading through saturation in
Shankar sir, I muted all, so unmute your mic, please. Please unmute your mic, Shankar sir.
Yeah. So in the typical construction and operation and the refurbishment is where the entire CO2 is generated. So this is where it comes through. Okay. So I'll try and give you a context there in a visual form. So scope 1 on the left is the fuel that we use in the operations, the vehicles that we ply, the kind of oil that we burn, the boilers that we have, the energy that we have, the company fleet, all these is what is scope 1. Scope 2 is electricity on the grid, and the scope 3 is the travel. You can see that in the past 18 months, there's been limited critical industry that's functioned, which has functioned. Business as usual has happened in some, but the commute, the business travel has reduced. There's been a lot of travel costs that's been reduced. Audits have been done through the virtual mode. So that's about how it's happened. There are critical sectors like the power, healthcare, some sectors that continued, but you can see that there's been some degradation, some decrease in the CO2 emissions overall. So in a slide here that looks at a typical renewable kind of source there, how the power is generated from whatever the source, how it is transmitted, how it is the entire value chain of emissions and the focus on the manufacturing, pre-construction manufacturing and the entire value chain here. So this explains how you could, what is the GHG emissions, how would you measure emissions? You measure it by scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. How would you do it? You do it by identifying the equipments and you do it by various ways. So you have various templates as part of the GHG or GRI example. You have emissions, generation of electricity, steam, heat. You've got physical, chemical processes. You've got transportation of people, of staff in business-owned, controlled vehicles, fleet buses. You also comprise and capture fugitive emissions from intentional, unintentional releases. Equipment leaks also be factored in, seals, etc. HFCs and emissions from the refrigerations, the HVACs, they contribute to a large part of scope 1. Scope 2 is simple. It's from the electricity purchase that's either consumed or owned. You could get it from the grid, you could get it from an alternative supplier, you can get it from solar plant, generated from renewable, but also the challenges that you could circumvent. So that is scope 2 emissions. Scope 3 is again the one that kind of is not so accurately measured. It's optional, as they say, but it's the indirect emissions that the business can influence but not directly control. It's called upstream or downstream emissions. So air travel, material that comes into your site, all that kind of is scope 3. It's important to also understand the reason why we're doing what we're doing. Like we said, if we heard of the tipping point, if we're able to focus on reducing the emissions, this is important that we consider what we can do to reduce it. So we got to scope it all and we got to kind of look at how it's measured. There is significance, there is scale, the relevance to business, spoke about materiality. These are some of the criteria that you need to do. The potential for reduction also is one way. So when we do assess and measure the carbon footprint, identify the scope, we got to look at the significance. We also got to look at the operational boundaries, define this well. You could have global operations, you kind of scope it all. You also have contractors. How do you ensure that you factor your value chain, your vendors, like we said? And there is the equity share approach, the financial control approach, and the operational control approach. So what then is operational control? If you're able to control the activities of our contractors or vendors and supply chain, that's where we could use that. But we can choose the approach best that works for us, and I can see that the various challenges, but also solutions there to measure scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 for a typical company, manufacturing, R&D, construction, the various scenarios there where you can identify what you scope in and what you scope out, and also what you kind of continue between the block 1, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. Okay. You can also use various protocols. The NCOD protocol is one that used to measure this direct, indirect emissions, defines it well, and there is various approaches. The reason I'm showing you this is you can go back to the standards, look at these, and we'll share the slides also. But approaches to get carbon neutral is what we need to do. A data collection tool is important. You got to first get a baseline. And how to get a baseline? You got to look at, this is a GRI template 305.1, which looks at the direct emissions. So you can see at a simple glance, I'm just giving an example. You look at the fuel that you use, the petrol, the diesel, the LPG you consume, the CO2 that comes in from welding. So these are what kind of scope into the GHG emissions due to direct energy emissions consumption in the site. Okay. And typically you do it for the last year, but you could do it real time since then. It's the electricity, the what you use in the guest houses, in the company offices, the power, the head offices, renewable also could be scoped there. So month on month, day on day, you got to factor it and look at it all and measure it in basis of ton CO2. And finally, scope 3, you could look at this from how you would look at material that comes into the site that comes in from people who are traveling. So all that is part of what is scope 3. So this is a typical template you would use to measure CO2 emissions, and this is how you measure GHG emissions as the basis of ton CO2. So what there is a roadmap ahead, friends. So you can have high level roadmaps to net carbon zero or net carbon neutral. How do you do that? You could also support forestry projects. You know, there is a couple of calls we've been getting about people who want to reduce carbon. How do they do that? They can do carbon sequestration. Typically in this month of June, you all planted trees. How you can support forestry projects? This particular gentleman who has helped ITC who manufactures paper. How can you, compensate? How you can do carbon abatement by planting trees, having forestry projects? How we can also do biogas, support cookstove projects, support solar lighting. How we can you also purchase carbon offset? So I purchase carbon credits and I've kind of made my family carbon neutral for the last 10 years. Something you can do. You can also produce it because that CO2, that carbon offset is kind of this is credible and certified carbon credits are available. It can be done through the stock exchanges, it can be done locally also. It is very reasonable and kind of there's a kind of ballpark price there. And you can actually make your employees carbon neutral. So that's something that you can think of, how we can make every one of your employees come and chap in by getting them carbon offsets, buying carbon certified carbon CERs, what we call it, certified carbon emission reduction certificates. You can get that and make them carbon neutral. Some of the terms there, we spoke about it, is there in the slides there. The CO2, the carbon dioxide equivalent, the ton CO2, the ton carbon dioxide equivalent, and some of the challenges there, kilowatt peak, megawatt peak. So how can you offset carbon footprint? Various ways you can speak about, optimize travels, produce a greener energy mix, use efficient buildings. And calling it from Hyderabad, where there's a first green building that I have that is next to my home, the greenhouse. I'll speak about that. And we spoke about some of the ways we can really try and be carbon neutral or climate neutral or carbon positive. And they're not limited to just carbon. You can look at water also. So this is how we could look at optimal ways of reducing carbon. And these are challenges that we have, how we can reduce. But they say that first step is to measure and then you can reduce. So powering a renewable energy, we're looking at all these and how can we really look at that? A lot of clients require, need us to be climate conscious, not climate agnostic. They want us to look at social responsibility, look at sustainability, look at all that as part of the expectations there. And that's why I think at the marketplace, you need to look at an analyst who look at sustainability indices. And there's also development financial institutions, the international finance corporations who fund the projects, the DFCs, and they look at, the lot of sustainability initiatives. And there are various indices that ensure that companies, they look at the 400 conscious, social conscious companies in the Morgan Stanley Scale D 400 social index and looks at the green tech definitions, the Dow Jones, and sustainable, social, responsible investment, green marketing. So this is the way that you can really, the carrot for the entire CEO is a lot of these, helps in get funding at low cost, green bonds. So GHG accounting is also something that is, got to be done in a manner that is, follows certain principles. It also works for sustainability. It's got to be relevance. It's got to be complete, consistent, transparent, and accurate. The relevance is relevant to the users. It's got to be as per the organization structure. It's got to have operational boundaries. There has to be a business context there. The completeness, it has to be estimated appropriately. It has to have the chosen inventory model needs to be accounted for. And a comprehensive and meaningful inventory is compiled. You can be exceptions, but there's got to be kind of thresholds thereof. There's got to be consistent, it's got to be transparent and accurate. The quantification calculation should be fair. There can be approximations, but it's got to be kind of consistent across time. So what can we do there? That is quality of data. We need to understand and set a good baseline, a consistent data that has accessibility, transparency, and compatibility. You also got to look at consumption habits, greener and more efficient productions, and look at overall reducing the emissions. We spoke about this, and I mentioned at talk of it. A lot of companies, a lot of people tend to greenwash. By CRs, I am carbon neutral, but I drive a car to work. I keep the AC on. I leave my lights off on in my cabin. I leave the AC at a temperature of 70 degrees centigrade. So it's greenwashing is about projecting a big image. A lot of companies, a lot of people spend more time in advertising to be green than actually implementing business practices that minimize environmental impact. It's important to look at how we manage a carbon footprint, capture it. You can also need to assure, and this is a good part of what we speak, this ISO standard there. It's also good to assure, and I think a small context of assurance is the important events that's happened in the climate change. We spoke about some of the protocols. 1992 is where it started. The Rio de Janeiro, the Rio Summit in 1992, the Berlin in 1995, the first conference of parties, the Kyoto Protocol of the third, COP3 in 1997, and then there was the Copenhagen one. There's one more coming up, and there's the Paris that we spoke about that Trump walked on, and now a good friend Joe is back. So this is how a lot of countries have hosted summits, and there's a global push. And just to give you a context of what it is to be evening in Paris, there's 194 states that signed up. You can see that is a global outlook that looks at how we can reduce the impact, the global warming goal to keep it below 2 degrees, how they are reviewing it, how it's country driven at the base of it, how there is nationally determined contributions, how each the developed and developing countries can mitigate the climate crisis. So this is how typically what happens in the conference of parties. India also has its NDCs, the nationally determined contributions, and look at establishing, we spoke about this word here, the carbon sink. A carbon sink is what has carbon abatement potential. This is what kind of helps in reducing the carbon footprint there. So that is the overall scenario there. So there is a lot of risks to business continuity, and all of these could lead to financial losses. And therefore, climate change is also impacting the ultimate bottom line. It helps get the money back. So that's where I think all of it fits into the jigsaw in a nice way. So this is some of the principles of GHG accounting. The slides will come to you, and the various standards that help you in quantification. This is just to give you an idea of how GHG accounting and estimation happens. You set a base year, you set the boundaries, you have the various steps there, you roll up report. In the various steps, you could do it in a year, in months. This is how well your organization is aligned, integrated. So this kind of helps you as a step one, baseline the carbon footprints, set a 0 year, could be 2021 to start with, and then try and take the operational boundaries, set the overall parameters, measure the GHG emissions, identify which vehicles, which equipment, where is the electricity or the content on vehicles, understand what's the scope, kind of define all the GHGs quantified, and then identify it, and then get into the calculations, then kind of look at the entire, this is the important part of it, you need some expertise there. So look at the GWP potentials and try and look at the CO2 factors, work out across various continents, you might be a global company, and then try and roll up the entire operation using tools, platforms there. You could also have a verification and assurance you could use, and that's where I think a lot of peers in the various renewable business, including companies, have adopted tools, including integrated report and how sectors are coming there. So the assurance kind of helps you perform, test, and evaluate the results. It gives you consistency, reliability, and also gives you, that's the fact that the big brother watching. You can do various levels, moderate, and various scenarios there, and then you could look at how you could look at assurance calculation. What happens after this? When you do the baselining, you do the identification, do the reporting, and then do the perhaps the carbon footprint assurance, you get into mitigation. So then that's how you look at assurance and get into contents, and then get into assurance. How's India doing in the Indian landscape? It's all about Swachh Bharat. So the India GDP projection, touchwood, with the various scenarios post-COVID, this is the way it's intended to grow. It's done pretty well. The global value-add growth scenarios kind of see a good growth 2025. That is the aggregate in all scenarios, which gives you good growth. The electricity demand is kind of ramping up, be it the residential, the industry, the services. The demand based on various sectors is also growing. So therefore, there is electricity demand that is got to be fulfilled. If you're able to get an act together and get a context for renewables, be it alternative energy of whatever kind. This is vital to tracking progress through a thriving, sustainable future. So there are various options: the bioenergy, the geothermals, the hydropower, oceans, the solar photovoltaic, of course, the wind power, and there are various alternatives, including solar thermal and concentrating solar thermal projects. So each of these, so the global scenario here is there is some good growth in the power sector. Renewables are growing pretty fast. It's experienced record high increases in installed capacity. The share of renewables in industrial energy, however, remains small, particularly in sectors that require high process temperatures. And despite we spoke about it, gains in energy efficiency, continued growth in both biofuels. You've seen some flights taking off on that part of it, and electric vehicles. Transport remains sector with the lowest share of renewable energy. So great challenge there for us to look at that part of it. And there is not enough account for global increase in final energy demand, because there is a big challenge there. The energy demand globally also is big. It's also about the policy, how we can, the climate change policies across the last 2-3 years have directly or indirectly tried to stimulate interest in renewables. The policy frameworks continue to evolve in response to the changes in renewable energy technologies and markets. There are targets that align, but it's also a challenge where the countries continue to turn to, auctions. A large number of jurisdictions are directed towards policies to ensuring greater integration of what's called the variable renewable electricity. So the effective policy support is a key to advancement in renewables. And I think some of you are working in industry, in governmental roles, how we can influence, how we can ensure that these kind of are supported in a manner that the return on investment, some of these projects is not so high, not so good. But if you're able to look at the market trends and understand how, so there is the modern bioenergy provides 5.1% of the total global energy demand. The geothermal, the global hydropower, the solar, all of these are bound to grow because each of these has capacities that is growing there. And I think the challenges thereof is how we are able to tap these and use the demand and try and see how the market and industry trends can be captured there. As a global scenario, you can see that it's still the projection for the baseline for last year. That's the fossil fuels, that's still highest kind of guzzler there. You can see the nuclear energy, the modern renewables coming in there. So there's a way to go here. There's a big kind of need there, and there's an opportunity for the renewables to really fill in there in a big way. You can see that across the last 2018 and 19, there's been investments that's gone up, and this is the scenario that's there locally. This is the Indian scenario, and there's a global scenario there also. How we can focus on transport, like we said, how we can focus on the hydro, wind, solar, biopower capacity and tap the oceans is one opportunity there for us to really grow here. So the renewable power capacity in the world and the top regions, you can see that if you do a comparison across the world total, the technology that is being used, renewable technology, I think compared to China and United States, we are quite there in gigawatts because we're a big country and a big heart, but therefore there's a big opportunity there for us to be a big player in renewable. We have taken a challenge there in a green energy challenge there, getting smart cities and getting to leverage these. But this is the context and connection to where India is in the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, in the clean challenge there. So the answer, friends, is indeed blowing in the wind. So there is, to wind up, there is, there's a challenge that a lot of the renewable energy sources have, but the global scenario is the estimated renewable share of total energy, despite growing faster than other energies, renewables make up less than 1/3 of the demand growth. So that's the big challenge there. So a lot of challenges faced by the RE technologies in India, particularly limited power sale options, lack of liquidity in day ahead markets. And there's also the measuring RE and conventional technology, same yardstick, you don't give them advantage there. So therefore, you need to really look at how we can augment the focus on renewables by the means we can. Like we said, India has sufficient NDCs, a good focus there. There's also the potential role of hydrogen in India. There's a pathway of scaling up low carbon hydrogen to the economy. India's alternatives also is the potential role of hydrogen, a pathway for scaling up. And there's a hydrogen demand is set to increase 5-fold by 2050. And therefore, there is the need to also focus on all that can be happening. We have the Make in India campaign, as we spoke about. You'll see some of the UCI and NEB keep talking about that. You can see the projected hydrogen demand going up. So there's a lot of locational factors. India needs to be proactive in the way we look at, based on the long-term fuel prices and the increased use of hydrogen could reduce costs and imports by just 20 billion by 2050. So there's a big opportunity there in using and tapping the hydrogen demands. Apologies for spell check there. So in the low carbon scenario, that's where the power, transport and industry segment, the hydrogen demand could go as high as that. You can see that the need to kind of go away from the typical fossil fuels and look at alternatives is in a big way going forward there. So the big national action on climate change that's come up to look at inclusive and sustainable strategies to protect the poor. There's a central versus state that we spoke about. The government of India, the Niti Aayog and the Ministry of Statistics and Project Implementation has had a focus on driving and allocating budgets there. There's the Bureau of Energy Efficiency that tells you a lot of, as you speak, looking at how we can conserve energy, the various acts that help there. There's the Energy Conservation Action that works towards getting, having a small thing like having a star-rated appliance to ensure that the energy consumption is lesser. And there's the energy landscape of India that has a lot of opportunities, including e-mobility, measurement across the various states also. So that, in a sense, is, I think, a safe and sustainable context there. So there is some measurements in India that there is typically, we are the guys who invented the first green core rating for industries. The parameters across, not just the climate change, looking at the specific water consumption, waste, renewables, increased use of renewables. So it's kind of percentage there that could be hiked up there. We're making a case for that. So the increase in recycles and enhancing recyclability and also rainwater harvesting, incorporating life cycle assessments, green policies, all this is part of what is the industry movement. And this is something that we signed up to a decade ago since a CII code for ecological sustainability business. And there's a big boom and the first of its kind demand where we try to focus on getting an industry green rating. So the parameters, once again, these are what help us in understanding what works in India. And the most difficult part of the life cycle is also product design, the materials used, and you can see the impact of disposal, use and recycling and the impact of logistics, the scope 3 you can talk of it. And of course, the drivers for excellence are all of what we spoke about. So this is to give you a context of circularity. The last bit I'll speak about. Let us learn to dream, and then we will perhaps find the truth is the guy who dreamt of a snake biting its tail and invented the benzene ring. The circular economy, the traditional as opposed to linear economy, the take, make, use, dispose. It talks about employing reuse, sharing, repair, refurbishment, remanufacturing, recycling. And this is how we could look at converting from the typical linear to the make, use, recycle, and use energy from renewable sources to summarize what I just said. So this as a life cycle is an extension, how we could really get across the value chain and the way we look at it, try and get a life cycle approach and have, reuse and recycle. There is some ways, of course, it also goes back to the food industry. Kind of the pizza is nothing makes sense. It's a slice. It comes in a circular kind of pizza. It's in a square box. So maybe there is a food challenge there, but for all of us, this is the shape of things to come. So just to summarize, we also ratified the Paris Agreement, made commitments to the COP of Paris, and we also decided as a country to increase the share of non-fossil. India has emerged as the global leader for renewable energy with investments that top these in fossil fuel. And as part of the National Electricity Plan, we also remain on track to overachieve is what we should be proud of. And we also taken a target to announce a new target of 450 gigawatt of renewable energy capacity. And this is something that we're trying to go in a large way across the distribution companies. Solar rooftops is something that's come with. And of course, there's a challenge in renewable. The payback period is always the challenge. But then you got to look at it as a different lens. The financial return on investment on alternative doesn't tell the whole story in this age of increasing air pollution, climate change, and decreasing fossil fuels. Solar and alternative energy makes a brilliant case for even without excellent financial return. So the future is renewable. There is a policy impetus is needed. There's a role that the renewables has to face, but we reach the tipping point, and therefore we need to look at how we can, give it the entire push in small ways. Simple living and green living makes us tall. We can also, and we need to also be like that. We need to be leading a life that is a lifestyle of health and sustainability. We need to measure the various ways by which you can measure a personal footprint, look at your household, your transport and lifestyle, and be a green champion in all of us. So that, friends, is why we need to keep learning. Let's learn to self-establish. Like we said, and always say that no footage was shot for this presentation, only use recycled material. and there's no rights reserved. You're able to share. We'll share the slides. You can share this wherever you want. We are all in this together. Thank you very much for being a great audience. Here's to powering a sustainable future. And on behalf of all of us, appreciate your feedback. Look forward to your questions. Sustainability evam jayate. So appreciate all that you said and look forward to being connected. And that's our contacts and coordinates. And we know that we have a hard stop at noon. Kokila, I think that's been an interesting session, and I'm happy to see a lot of hand raised.
Thank you so much for a wonderful session. Yet another wonderful session, sir. So I got lots of questions. So people who want to ask a question, so please unmute your mic and you may ask your question one by one. Before asking a question, please introduce yourself also.
So let's see what's come to the chat box until then. So there's been very good observations from Harish. I guess we will of course share the slide packs. That's the most popular question.
Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, Shankar sir.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Shankar sir. It has been a very fast flowing session. It was just like a flood which has really drenched all of us. Just my nose is up and my lips are up. Otherwise, my whole body is drenched. Thank you very much, sir. I just have a question that as the industrialization went on, post 80s, the AC buildings have come up, tall high-rise buildings, well-living swimming pools, and the consumption of ACs have mostly caused, besides the thermals and all those things, that greenhouse gases.
Very true.
Now, sir, for the last 1.5 years, it has been the Wi-Fi signals, and we're all surrounded by unknown waves that has been circulating us. Last time we told children not to touch mobile phone, but now we are encouraging children to be there with the mobile phones and the tabs and all those things because of the e-learnings and e-schools. Sir, what exactly is this going on, sir? Is this have a sustainability? Is there have a people growth? What's your view about this, sir? 20 years ahead, what will be there, sir?
Good thought. I think you're the best person to talk about it also, because like I said, we have not borrowed from our grandparents. We have inherited the earth from our grandchildren and the children and grandchildren in the new normal. How we are, going to manage this. You're right. The industrial revolution, growth, GDP's economic focus has been what drives industries, Shiva, and how we are able to engage, educate, improve the literacy, understand, make all of us, carbon management, like I said, is a big point here. So I guess the biggest challenge, Shiva, is how do we engage? This session also, this last 90 minutes, was in creating green champions, in ensuring all of us also understand the need to be green. I think the more we can communicate, each of us cascade the implications of what we do. So overall, I think industries are polluting. The industrial revolution from 1750 has resulted in pollution. There is a global warming that is embedded in design. How can we, abate? How can we, like we said, an industry that is polluting, how can we do things to reduce? How can we have sustainability in design? You spoke about the aircon. Yes, the air conditioning is part of all of it. I think in the businesses we have, the HVAC, that's the biggest guzzler. And you spoke about the impact of the GHGs also. We were able to ensure that we reduce that, focus on that. We spoke about the star rated equipment to use, fit for use, fit for reuse, fit to decon. All that is very important there. So I guess all about having a carbon lifestyle, a carbon neutral lifestyle to engage, to communicate, to cascade this message. I guess that's the only way forward. Is a simple one session or one activity that we do enough? No, that's a big thing you can do. And I guess that's a big journey there. You also epitomize behavioral safety in the ways that you do. It's important also safeguard this journey in creating, low carbon lifestyles. We speak of various aspects when you look at people's behavior, unsafe actions, unsafe at-risk behaviors. This is the biggest at-risk behavior of people, including children, families, and countrymen who can really impact and save the planet. Yeah, we have only one Earth. There is no plan B as we speak. So how we can do that? I hope that answers your question, Shiva.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Shankar. Thanks a lot. I was only talking about that ACs to wavelengths. Now,
Oh,
last
yes.
time we were surrounded by ACs. Now we have climate, much colder than, much better, comfortable than outside. Now the wavelengths have entered our houses. So
Very
that's
true.
what my worry was. Nothing else. Thanks a lot, Shenga. Thanks a lot for the
Welcome.
wonderful things. Right. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? I know a lot of us need to go somewhere else at 12. Recordings will be available, will be downloaded on YouTube. From tomorrow, everybody in the North QCI is now, after a year of working from home, is getting back to work. So we'll have the recordings definitely there. Shubi Goyal, you got a question? Shubi, please shoot a question. Pop it in the chat box. Thanks KK Mahor, thanks Praveen, thanks for the information grade. Thank Dharampalji for a feedback. Thank you Ashok, Ashok Kumar, you're so kind, you're a regular person at the webinars there. Yeah.
Yeah, Surabhi, please unmute yourself and ask your question. After that, IPQC Consulting. So your name is not coming here. This this is what we are able to read. So after that, you can also ask your question.
Hello, sir. I am Raju Gundala from IPQC Consulting. We wanted some program event like auditors, lead auditors, or energy, in the energy area. Is that type of trainings you offer?
Yeah, so there's a feedback form just come in. So what we'll be doing after this, we will take requests for a session that looks at, we spoke about the GG, we spoke about how we can capture it, how we can measure it, how we can assess it, how we can be qualified ESG certified professionals. So we will have a full day session on that. QCI will, as part of its initiatives towards Swachh Bharat, also look at ESG. We did a session last fortnight with the SEBI, with the Securities Exchange Board of India, and we will have more sessions to understand and demystify the Indian platforms of business responsibility and sustainability reporting. Yes, we will have more sessions. We'll have sessions that will get us more. This was, of course, the teaser. Or 90 minutes, you can cover so much. We try to give you a big context and give you whet your appetite for more. Yes, there is full day sessions that will come up, and we will have. We'll be happy to take your feedbacks on that. Yeah. And thanks for the great work you're doing on IPQC. We will really appreciate your insights, because the more people like you who come on board the green bus, the safer and cleaner, and the renewable journey will be definitely gaining momentum. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
So it's time for a group photograph. So I'm requesting you all to kindly switch on your camera and mute your mic so that we can have a group photograph for our Quality India magazine. The magazine which we give to all our QCI member and registered consultant auditors. So you just visit to our website, or you can write to me also if you want to become a member of QCI. And thank you. First of all, thank you, sir, for this wonderful session. So we hope that training objective has fulfilled, and we are expecting that the learning from this session or implemented practice in your organization. In case of any other training needs for your organization, you can write us. And you can mention in the feedback form also. If you have any questions related to the program, you can mail me or Shankar sir. Our details were given there. And now who is going to click the picture? Shankar sir, I'm also going to take the picture. And
pleasure. I think
this is virtual platform, so I'm requesting you, like whosoever can take a good picture. So please take it and share it with me, so that I'll put it on social media, and it will be posted on social media as well. So I've taken one. Thank you so much. Nice to see your bright faces on Wednesday morning. Thanks for joining in. So that's all from Quality Council of India. We have another webinar, as Shankar sir has told us, has informed you that that will be on 12th of July. So I'm going to share the details regarding that program with you all. So Shankar sir, you may want to, if you would like to, brief about that particular training program, so you can give the introduction or just a brief about the program, so that people can participate that. And for this particular training program, we are not going to give a certificate. Participation certificate will not be given for any kind of free webinar. But yes, for a training session, we'll be definitely giving you a participation certificate. Since we are working from home, So for the YouTube, this recording for this session, we are going to put on our YouTube channel, but it will take some time. So kindly bear with us. Yes, presentation we'll share within 2 to 3 days. Meanwhile, I'm requesting you all to please share your feedback, because that is very useful for us for organizing next training program. So over to Shankar sir. Shankar sir will brief you about the upcoming session on BSR, which we are having on 12th of July. Thank you.
Yeah, so as always, I think well begun is half done. A lot of good work stops, and thanks for the feedback in the chat box. We'll also post the pictures in the chat box. Important to also consolidate the gains and leverage what we've done, but taking next steps. So towards making this a green challenge, we will do a session that will demystify. You heard of the BRSR earlier from the 2012 to now. All the companies, the listed entities plus have been engaged, and now the SEBI has mandated that they come into the reporting at looking at ESG risk and opportunities. So here is a great platform for us also to understand what is the expectation, what's happening in India, to get a real global context, to look at the best practices. And is sustainability reporting just one step? Is that just a tick in the box? We want to avoid greenwashing. So the next session, mid-July, as Kokila said, will try and explain, demystify the various global platforms, try and see, spoke about some terms there, the CDP, the SBTI, the RE. All these are terms we will talk about in greater details. We have a full day session there on popular demand. We also had that when we did the session with SEBI, and we'll try and keep this going to help you really understand. So the one literacy that is important here is the green imperative. We'll get you all wearing your green hats and get that also help you going. So thank you so much for your presence. We look forward to